Titanic 2 is the action movie event that proves that the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Just like the ego of OceanGate CEO Stockton Rush, who ignored all expert opinion on how dangerous his deep-sea submarine actually was. This movie opens up following a surfer in the Arctic. A little weird for a surfer to choose that location to catch some waves. Hawaii? Yeah, believable. Australia's Gold Coast? Yeah, believable. But the Arctic? I guess we have to show something for the opening title sequence and tie it back into Titanic somehow. In fact, this whole sequence is so pointless that even though the surfer dies, the surfer is never mentioned again. The whole takeaway from the sequence was the ice caps are melting. That's when we then see the Titanic 2. Remember that scene from Titanic where everyone was waving goodbye to the passengers? Yeah, that's in this movie, despite this movie taking place in the 21st century. No one waves on cruise ships anymore now that we have airplanes. This ship is stocked full of people who obviously do not believe in superstition, a decision that they will come to regret later, along with the owner of the ship, just like Stockton Rush. I know this is the second joke I made about the CEO of OceanGate. I'll let up on him for the rest of this review because, quite frankly, he's under a lot of pressure right now. Now, how do we know that this entire voyage is nothing more than an ego trip? Because they launched the Titanic 2 with fireworks and fighter jets flying over it. Have I mentioned that this is an Asylum film? So just like Tenet, don't think about the logic too much.
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
We then have this whole subplot involving the U.S. Coast Guard and NOAA investigating the glacier ice melting. This is when Brooke Burns is introduced into the movie.
Dr. Kim Patterson, NOAA.
Nice to meet you.
Brooke Burns from Baywatch, but most of you might remember her as the host of the American version of Dog Eat Dog. Her being a scientist is just as believable as Denise Richards was as a nuclear physicist.
Are you here for a reason? Or are you just hoping for a glimmer? And you are?
Mikhail Arkhov, Russian Atomic Energy Department. Miss...
Dr. Jones. Christmas Jones. And don't make any jokes, I've heard them all.
During this horrible green screen sequence, someone is collecting snow samples and drops one of the canisters. And that's what causes the ice to break. Again, an Asylum film, folks. And I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. The guy who drops the canister dies via a cheap green screen effect. The scientist and Coast Guard guy get in the helicopter and fly towards Titanic 2. The ice break creates a tsunami that is carrying the iceberg and is going to hit Titanic 2. So, instead of a stationary iceberg, it's coming at him like a speeding bullet. Oh, and to add more tension to the plot, the helicopter is low on fuel and needs a mid-air refuel. And yes, a mid-air refuel is an actual thing. I'm showing video footage of it here right now. The iceberg hits the Titanic 2 and everyone gets to the lifeboats, which this movie has some really bad CGI, but these lifeboat launches look like they were ripped from a Saturday morning cartoon. Half of the lifeboats are damaged when the iceberg hits, but once again, let's add some more tension to the plot. The first wave wasn't the worst part. The second wave is going to be even bigger, basically turning the lifeboats into death traps. Oh, let's increase the stakes again. The helicopter couldn't get the refuel because the plane that was delivering the fuel got hit by the first wave. This movie isn't just a ripoff of Titanic, it's basically a more souped up version of the Poseidon Adventure from the 1970s. We still get moments that are ripped straight from Titanic, like the people sliding and falling off the boat, to the hallway running scene. Just like in Titanic, the stand-in for Rose refuses to get onto a lifeboat, but it is to save the other girl from the infirmary. The guy who owns the boat, the stand-in for Jack Dawson, reluctantly goes along with her. The girl from the infirmary is injured and they have to keep pressure on her wound with a credit card. I know what you're thinking, but this is an Asylum movie. Just don't overthink it. I could go on and on about these three, about what these three have to do, but it's easier to just mention that the girl who was injured dies in a very gruesome way.
I can't get through. The opening's too small. Go, Amy.
The accident's gonna
Amy,
hold.
go.
Hurry! The door's gonna slam shut!
Hurry!
Come on! Come on!
Help me, I can't get through. Push.
Get through!
Right in the axe.
I know! Pull it back! Pull it back!
Kelly?
Store brand Jack and Rose have to get to the diving suits and hopefully survive the second wave instead of getting into a lifeboat, because remember, the second wave is going to turn the lifeboats into death traps. This leads to a very long sequence where they have to shimmy over a pipe to avoid being electrocuted by an exposed wire and water on the floor. Honestly, this sequence goes on for way too long. They get to the diving suit, and what do you know? There's only one diving suit. Now, we all know that store brand Jack and Rose could have both fit in the diving suit, just like in the 1997 movie where they both could have fit on the door. Store brand Jack decides to give the diving suit and oxygen to store brand Rose, just like in the original Titanic, and I will give Asylum credit for this one because the logic makes sense. Store brand Jack decides to drown instead of dying of hypothermia in the hopes that they can get rescued in time for him to be revived. The Coast Guard helicopter runs out of fuel, but the Coast Guard guy has already dived down into the shipwreck to find store brand Jack and Rose. Brooke Burns throws down a tent raft and the helicopter crashes into the ocean, taking the pilot with him. Store brand Jack and Rose get rescued, but store brand Jack's plan doesn't work.
Come on, breathe. Breathe. Come on, Hayden. Hayden, breathe. Come on. Come on, damn it. Breathe.
And that's all, folks. Oh, more Coast Guard helicopters are seen flying over, so it looks like Brooke Burns, the Coast Guard guy, and store brand Rose get rescued. What I like about this movie is that Asylum knows exactly why people watch Titanic. It's not for the love story between Jack and Rose. It's to watch the ship sink into the ocean. There is only one scene to establish a love story between store brand Jack and Rose, and that's it. More emphasis is put on the ship sinking. My only real gripe with this movie is so much of the action takes place in the dark. I get it, if a ship really went down the ocean at night, you ain't seeing shit. But in a movie, it's important to show the audience what's going on. I saw this movie at night in a room with all of the lights turned off, and I still struggle to see what was happening half the time. But you know what? If you want to watch Titanic just for the ship sinking and nothing more, you will probably enjoy this movie. Yeah, it's garbage, but there's nothing wrong with watching garbage from time to time. That's why The Big Bang Theory was popular, and also the Kardashians. Hold on, I better end this video before I go there. Roll the end screen right here.